I spent some time with one of my most important spiritual teachers this summer. And she said to me, forgive a word that's about to come out of my mouth, but she said, life is a golden ticket. Don't wipe your ass with it. And I really could only take that in conceptually at first because I thought, well, of course not. Who would do that? Right? But then, as fate would have it, we heard from the Jung Center and they asked us to do this talk. They told us that they were considering the topics of languishing and flourishing, sent us some interesting articles to read. And I found myself reading about myself when I looked at languishing, which was both alarming and comforting because you never want to know something's wrong with you, but once you know, you can do something with it. And being a person that is devoted to my conscious evolution, I ran with it. And I do realize that the topic was really more about flourishing, and I wanted to orient you a little bit to why you'll hear me speak more about languishing today than flourishing. And the reason is because of an upgrade to the definition of opposites. Languishing and flourishing are partners. We always learned that opposites were each other's other, that one was on an island over here and the other over here. And we see this right in our current society. If you don't think like I do, I hate you, right? Or I don't want to be around you. And we've done that even to the most basic of opposites. And I'm going to use the analogy of on and off. We were taught if the lights are on, then they're not off. Off is not important, off is not needed, off isn't around. But off is a part of on. We only can understand that the lights are on because there's an off. So we really need to understand this relationship, that this is a partnership. And so I'll let you guess where I came up with these symptoms, having let you in on the fact that I recognized myself in this topic of languishing. These are my symptoms, and I'll just read them to you. Living purgatory. The gift of a life wasted on accident. Chronic meh feelings about life. Being frenetically busy because you don't like what it feels like when the music stops and you're alone. An absence of the joy of being you. Living for someone else's benefit versus for love of yourself or your life itself. This was a big one for me, especially. Leading life from a very heady or intellectual place versus from a heart wisdom place. Feeling a lack of flow, and by this I want to be really clear, I don't mean productivity or prove your worth today. I mean being in flow with your life's purpose, your primal life force. And it feels like being caught mid-fall, afraid of what will happen if you fall deeper, when that's exactly where you need to go. So as I said, I took this and ran with it. I looked it squarely in the face and I decided to journey deeper into what is going on here. And this is not a mistake in my presentation. What happened is I went into my heart, I journeyed into my heart, and I found nothing. I found no light. And that's incredibly alarming to realize you've been going around in the dark. And back to our opposites, there was only one way I could know that I was in the dark. And that was because what came in for me was the little one that John and I share. She's 4, almost 5, and you know how new life just glows. They haven't been shut down yet. They're still living from their heart centers. And I found myself basking in her glow. But not just basking, I suddenly realized that I was actually siphoning. And the thing is that each of us comes here with a life force and with a light, gifts. And that comes in from our ancestors to our grandparents, to our parents, to us, and then we share it forward with the world. It's not right that I was using her light to remedy the absence of my own. And this may not show up for other people in this way. Some of you may not even have children, but it's interesting to notice, where am I getting light? From whom? Or from what am I using an external source of light to replace the missing internal source of light in my own heart? And the reason I'm self-disclosing this is because what happens when you get to know yourself better is you get to know everybody else better too. And I'd been seeing this in my practice and around, just the individuals I would come in contact with. But when I came out, it was just glaring, like that this is a collective crisis that we're having in the world. And the reason we have wilted flowers here is because it's like we all really want to do good in the world. We want to help each other. But when we're coming from a place of such dimly lit lives and such disconnection, we're handing out wilted flowers. And how much good can that do, really? And so, speaking of the pandemic and the stay-at-home orders and what happened there, this is an oversimplified version of what I saw happen. We had one bucket of people who went, "Oh my God, life is short. Thank you for reminding me. There are things I need to do, people I need to love that I have been putting to the side in favor of this productivity model," right, that we were talking about before. So they moved to the country, they picked up the instrument, they started painting, they started sharing poetry, and they lit up. Then there was the other bucket of us that doubled the list of things to do, quadrupled the news watching, sextupled the stress levels, disconnected even more, not just from others, but from what was going on in my own heart, our own hearts. And I always want to say that, when we do self-discovery, if you resonate with the second category, don't berate yourself or criticize yourself. Self-discovery is never for judgment, it's for enlightenment. So we notice this with a lot of compassion to ourselves and to each other. But the thing about the second category, and let's be clear, COVID didn't cause these two buckets. COVID was a mirror, and we saw ourselves reflected in it. That's it. So that second category of people is going around stuck. The life force that wants to come through is stuck. And stagnation, as we call it in Chinese medicine, really hurts. It hurts a lot. And that we're talking physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. You can't separate these aspects of the self apart. And in my medicine, we treat them as one because one affects the other inevitably. And so we are going around in pain from trying to prevent ourselves from feeling a certain amount of pain. But the first bucket of people we talked about, they moved into joy, love, light, creativity. They moved into their heart's desires and soul's longings. And as I say these words, I feel aware of how saccharine sweet they can sound. Because we have made Hallmark card words out of these words and phrases, which, no offense to Hallmark, but we have forgotten that these words represent life force itself. We have put them on the back burner for when there's time, when there's money, etc. And where is the birthplace of these? Where do these feelings live in your body? If we look at just the word love, you only have had to fall in love or had heartbreak one time. Can anyone point to where in your body you have felt it? Yeah, it's irrefutable. This feeling happens here. We have this amazing processor that tells us what we call it. Oh, love. Oh, heartbreak. Thank you, But we have started to think it just all happens here. It's here. And that's important because another upgrade to our definitions, we're talking heart with a capital H. Our heart organ that we know it as is an incredible muscle that uses this magnificently efficient fractal system to pump oxygenated blood all over your body like this, just without you even having to think about it for your whole, hopefully long life. And that's miracle enough. But then when you add that all of those feelings live in your heart, it becomes pretty magical. And the thing is if you were just an organ, your physical self with the electrical impulses or the energy that animates it, then you would be a robot. And I don't think any of you think that you're a robot. I don't think I'm a robot. There's something extra, right? There's something that, whether we call it spirit or soul or personality, some might say they feel infused with God or their great creator. There's all kinds of ways to relate to this, but there's something more. And I write here animal of the humankind on purpose, because we are animals and we have forgotten our place in nature. And I do think that's part of the issue here. And so, with these various definitions, we have a diagnosis. We have stagnation of life force in the heart, the capital H heart. But the question is, why do so many of us share a similar diagnosis? Why is this so resonant? And I think it's because of this pain that I touched on earlier. Pain is an incredibly strong form of life force, but we don't understand how to use it. It's stuck power. You know, earlier when I was showing the wilted flowers, one thing I wanted to say with that was, we are going through life, parenting and partnering and teaching, we're policing, doctoring, we're leading companies and countries in pain and in the dark. And we don't make the greatest choices in the dark. So those same people that brought us up with tons of compassion, they didn't know how to shepherd us through intense pain. They didn't know how to tell us, this is an opportunity, actually. And so here's where we are. We have this incredible amount of life that wants to happen, but we're unplugged because we're so afraid of the sparks that are going to fly once we actually feel what we've been numbing ourselves to. And this is what it tends to look like. This is what shows up in my office. This is what I see around me. Mine looked more like the one on the left. It literally felt cold in there when I investigated. And you can do this yourself. And what we've done is we have, with really good intentions, protected the place where we feel love and its opposite, heartbreak. We've shut it down to protect ourselves. But the problem is that short-term solutions, often the ones that saved our lives, were never meant to be long-term solutions. And so here we are, maybe 2, 3, 4 decades, maybe more, into this protective place, and we've shut off from living our lives, from the most important place to live our lives. And in the absence of the wisdom of our hearts and the light of our hearts, we have put a crown on our brains. Our brains are really, obviously, really critical tools. And I lump ego in with this. But what we need to remember is that the brain / ego, these make incredible assistants, but terrible leaders. But we've put them at the helm. We're going through life leading with this very limited tool because we've shut down our most wise tool, the parts of ourselves that contain infinite wisdom and the orders for how to live our most thriving, flourishing life. And it's one of those bad news, good news situations. There's no way out. There's only in. I'm telling you, I mean, you can Google, how do I get out of languishing? How do I thrive? How do I flourish? And you'll find, incorporate these 8 things into your day. Do these 4 things. That's great. It might move the needle a little bit, but if I'm honest, I think you're going to find yourself back at square one because no one else can tell you what's in your heart and how to live your most thriving, flourishing life. There's only one person who can do that, and it's you for yourself. And I want to say that if anyone watching at home or here is like, what is she talking about? I have no idea what she's saying. I want to tell you to celebrate because you're living a fully alive, heart-led, lit up life, and we need you to show us the way. Light the way for those of us who are still figuring out how to light ourselves up. But if this does sound familiar to you in any way, I want you to remember that what we've been doing for so long is taking these heart's desires and the things that are just knocking on you from the inside, and we've been putting them back on the pantry shelf like there's some sort of non-perishable item that we can open another day, week, month, or decade. But every time we put our heart's desires, remember, not the Hallmark card heart's desires, but your life force and even the pain aside to be dealt with another day, our light dims a little bit more and a little bit more until it starts to feel like we die. And there is something, if not lots of things, that are kind of dying to come to life from inside of you. So fall with me. I'm right there with you. Don't wait for a major wake-up call, some kind of near-death experience or diagnosis to realize that your life is a golden ticket. Maybe right now, maybe just after today, you'll go home and you'll take some breaths into your heart because it's a romance you have to have. Just like getting to know somebody else's heart. It might be a little bereft. You can place your hand over your heart and you can take some breaths into your heart. And I'm aware of time, and I want to give John his full amount of time. But just close your eyes for a couple of seconds here. You might be able to feel the beating of your heart on the outside of your body, but if you follow your breath in, follow it in and into your heart, and notice, is it warm? Is it light? Are there some desires or longings that I've been ignoring? You can just take it one step at a time. Engage with all of the mysteries that are hiding inside of your heart and want to come out and want to be known by you. Thank you.
Hi, folks. Leila Scott, you're fantastic. I love that you even were considerate of Hallmark when you said no offense to Hallmark. So we're going to go on a journey. I want you to think about something. Where are we going and how do you prepare? Right? What do you do? Like, really think about it for a moment. I mean, does your mind go to, what do I pack? Do you start to Google, what do you do when you go on a journey? When you travel, what you likely do is look at what other people have thought about it before, what's worked, what hasn't worked, phone a friend, say, oh, you guys went there, let me know, like, what's a good spot to go to. If you're going to a lunch place, you want to so we consistently do this, right? We're always looking at shared information and shared perspective. We want to know how it's gone for you, right? And we trust other people. If they say that restaurant sucks, then it's likely not going to be top of our list unless we find other information that says that place is amazing. So we trust story. We trust what other people have done before. And held inside of our collective knowledge is a resource. It's a deep, archetypal, collective resource that says, here's how you navigate this. Here's how you make sense of yourself, of other people, of other cultures, of other ways of being in the world. You're not alone. We've done this before. Right? This is the message of the journey of the Magi, certainly held in the early Christian myth. But this is the message in myth, in mythology. Mythology is a storehouse of what has worked, what has not worked, what are the contradictions, the confusions. And we talk about it in the form of a journey for a very good reason, because we can call it a process, we can call it an experience, but most definitely our life is a curriculum. And you are not the first one to do this. So you don't have to go it alone, even though there are times where you're going to be alone. And mythology is one of those landscapes where we can fall into trust. Other people have tried it before. And I want to try to crack that open a little bit today. So in my technological mess, I have some notes here. Usually I would be pacing the floor, by the way, but the camera's not going to be able to keep up with me. So I can sit right here and you'll watch my heart heat, as Leo Scott was talking about earlier, that's about to explode. So, and most definitely, I'm part of that explosive arena. So I want to read this fella, Carl Ruck is his name. He's a fantastic fella. He's written a ton of books, more than I could even read probably. But he wrote a book on classic myth. And he says, myth expresses and presents the values of the individual and the collective. And by the way, I'm going to land this plane on flourishing and languishing, just so y'all know. So Ruck says 14 things. I didn't print them because I just want you to listen. Don't write them down. Just listen. There's nothing intellectual here. There is, but just I want you to have the experience. Myth is what we call somebody else's reality. Our own myths we call reality. Often other people's myths surface in aspects of our world that are considered somewhat less real. However implausible, myth is accepted as historical fact. When the validity of myth within a culture comes into question, ways are sought to salvage some part of it so that the culture does not lose its heritage or roots. The salvageability of myth after the loss of confidence in its factual validity is facilitated by its universal elements, psychological complexes, archetypes, structures, or whatever else that make it always in some way true. Myths are first and foremost word, mythos, and primarily spoken. Myths are accepted unreflectively on their own as whole blocks of meaning. Contradictory myths can coexist with equal acceptance. Amongst these unnoticed contradictions is a suspension of linear chronology. Logic, which derives from the scientific study of language as a grammar for argumentation, is not dominant in myth, which is unexaminable speech. The basic categories in the grammar of myth are binary polarities, which are mediated usually in the definition of personal and cultural identities. Classical mythology is still largely retrievable in the form that it existed before the failure of its belief system. Last one. Although myth is a story, the stories are not only told through words. Myth, on some level, holds the tension of paradox. It is the language of heart, and it holds our story, our confrontations, our conflicts, our psychology, our history, our anthropology, our philosophy, our religion. It reveals to us ancient truths about our story, the human story. This is radical, right? This is radical. And as any good researcher, we want to start with the problem. Right, so what's the problem? Well, I think the problem in this dynamic of languishing and flourishing is that we have disconnected from the myth. And in Lila Scott's language, she would say her heart, right? Our hearts. And in a mythic framework, that really makes a lot of sense because we're disconnected from our people, from our story, our lineage. And I urge us all to reconnect with myth, to reconnect with your story, because whether you know it or not, you're living out a story, right? You come to a psychotherapist and I say, what's up? What's going on? And you tell me your story, where you hurt, where you were hurt, where you're confused, where you're stuck, who you are, what makes you tick, what you do, right? All that stuff is a story, right? We are story creating, story living out, story processing, story manifesting beings that are consistently in meaning and of meaning, interacting with meaning, seeking meaning. So one of the ways we can bring this out of the depths of our own imagination is through the word. Even the act of speaking, right, is a reduction of the infinite aspects of my own imagination. Trying to communicate something to you that has an equal effect, it fails. But if it can be patterned in such a way, right, then you can have a similar kind of experience that you can relate to, because there's got to be patterns, right? Or we would just be totally disconnected without any way to relate to each other. So, what Jung says is the man who thinks that he can live without myth or outside it is like one uprooted, having no true link either with the past or with the ancestral life which continues within him, or yet with contemporary human society. This is a great image from William Blake's work. Joseph Campbell calls myth the literature of the spirit. When the story is in your mind, then you see its relevance to something happening in your own life. These bits of information from ancient times, which have to do with the themes that have supported human life, built civilizations, and informed religions over the millennia, have to do with deep inner problems, inner mysteries, inner thresholds of passage. And if you don't know what the guide signs are along the way, you have to work it out yourself. And that, I think, is where languishing and flourishing comes in. You have to work it out yourself. Because we have not had rites of passage and ritual. We have not had the kind of initiatory experiences in our culture. Right? And what does that even mean, right? You know, when I ask people where they were initiated, you know what they say? Right? They say the first time they had sex, the first time they drank alcohol, the first time they drove a car, and when they left home. Some understandable. All make sense because actually they're fragments of ways in which our cultural history has initiated people throughout that history, except they fail. They're like little fragments. They don't quite have the juice. Right? So we go around aimlessly seeking something profoundly connecting in these moments that are but fragments, disconnected from their cultural myth, from the ground and the root from which they sprung. And I think that is a massive deal. That is a big deal. And we suffer greatly collectively. So before we go into the depths of what's wrong, I also want to orient us a little bit, because anytime I go on a journey, I want to know where I'm heading. Right? I know that stuff's going to happen along the way, but I definitely want to know where I'm going. What is my true north? So 5 dimensions of flourishing that are important. Happiness and life satisfaction. This is not mine. This is Vanderweel. And thanks to Sean, actually. He shared this with me. So I take exception to happiness. I like life satisfaction. Happiness, we've messed that up. Sean Aker at Harvard one time said, the greatest predictor of unhappiness is the pursuit of happiness. Right? Because we imagine happiness as the tangible thing, but actually it's the byproduct of the thing. Right? That's the essence, right? Happiness is a byproduct. Life satisfaction, that's a little more in line with what I would seek is contentment. Satisfaction seems grounded and rooted. Mental and physical health. If you're not attending to this, you're going to get wonky, needless to say. But what does that even mean? We'll see. Meaning and purpose. Again, what does that mean to you? Jim Hollis, when I asked him about meaning, he said, what quickens our experience. That was psyche. The Greek term psyche actually talks about warmth and quickening of the soul. It's subjective. It doesn't mean something rational. To work on character and virtue. How do you show up for yourself and for others in the world? And having close social relationships. So when you look at this, we can understand why we all might be going a little crazy right now. Why the world might be going crazy. Not only is it an opportunity to unlock all the shit that's at the bottom of the stagnant pond. It's what a meditation teacher of mine said once, that when you stick a stick in a stagnant pond and swirl it around, all the gunk at the bottom comes to the surface. Well, look at what we're doing now culturally. This is the gunk, and we got to look at it. We don't need to try to get out of it. We need to have an honest confrontation about what in the hell is going on with a bunch of batshit crazy people in our culture. Right? I mean, all of us, me too, right? Like, if you're not crazy, there's an old saying in I learned it from Priscilla Murr, one of our professors, said, if you're not anxious, you're not honest. Right? Like, anxiety is a natural experience, right? I like anxiety. We pathologized it, and we want to get rid of it, rather than figure out what it's actually doing. So more here. So in service to myth, okay, hang on, somebody's calling my phone right now, and so didn't they know that I'm lecturing and I'm about to start bashing on technology and hang on, sorry, y'all. This needs to come back for me here, thank you. Okay, so in thinking about myth, I have a professor of mine that we started talking about myth and flourishing and languishing, and one of the primary images from myth is from the Odyssey. Do you recall the Sirens in the Odyssey? Does anybody remember the Sirens? Everybody heard that term, a siren song? Well, this is the origin of the Sirens. Oddly enough, in the Odyssey, The Sirens represent about a page and a half of the entire book, right? Yet they left a pretty enduring mark. Circe says to Odysseus, once your crew has rowed you past the Sirens, her foresight won our fight, spirits over. Hang on, sorry, let me catch this. I didn't mark my page as well as I wanted to because I had it written out elsewhere. Bear with me, folks. First you will raise the island of the Sirens, those creatures who spellbind any man alive, whoever comes their way. Whoever draws too close, off guard, and catches the Siren's voice in the air, no sailing home for him, no wife rising to meet him, no happy children beaming up their father's face. The high, thrilling song of the Sirens will transfix him, lulling him there in their meadow. Round them heaps of corpses, rotting away, rags of skin shriveling on their bones. Race straight past the coast. Soften some beeswax and stop your shipmates' ears so no one can hear, none of the crew. But if you are bent on hearing, they have to tie your hand and foot to the swift ship, erect at the mast block, lashed by ropes to the mast, so you can hear the siren song to your heart's content. But if you plead, commanding your men to set you free, they must lash you faster, rope on rope. Fascinating. He's saying, I want to hear this voice, but I don't want to be seduced and taken under by it. The depiction of the Sirens in popular culture is not, as it always is, the depiction from ancient times. The Sirens were bird, part female, and they devoured you. They were cannibals. They ate the sailors. This image has changed quite a bit over time. I like this image because it actually begins to, this was painted in the mid-1800s, it actually begins to incorporate part of modernity, that we imagine this kind of feminine seduction, but also the harsh volatility of being consumed. So you may not even see the skulls at the bottom, but most people may get lost just staring at the women. There's an issue in our pandemic. Did y'all know this stat? Have y'all paid attention to this, that alcohol has increased drastically through the pandemic? Online alcohol sales went up 250 some odd percent, and alcohol sales increased by about 50%. What in the world does that mean to us? We are ill prepared. Right? And then so what we do when confronted with a totally incredible religious, transformative, wild event. I don't mean religion from any kind of particular dogma or tradition. By the way, I'm trying to reappropriate that word. I think it's been really taken up in a lot of, it's been made modern, and I'm trying to bring it back to antiquity. To be confronted, to be reconnected with something. That's relegare or relegare. One is to be reconnected, one is to reread. Take another look. Don't look at what appears at first. Dig deeper. What does this mean to us? That all of a sudden we're met with chaos and we rely on what James Hollis calls a secular surrogate. It has no root in the mythic tradition. Its root is in modern avoidance. Its root is in looking at a symptom and saying, that hurts, I don't like it, get rid of it. Rather than what Leela Scott was advocating earlier, that hurts, let me see, let me investigate. Let me have curiosity. Let me not respond to that which shakes me. Rudolf Otto, in The Idea of the Holy, an old book that I'm quite fond of, he calls it the mysterium tremendum. That which both the mystery that fascinates you and the mystery that terrifies you. Mysterium tremendum et fascinans. So yeah, it's going to shake us to our core. And we will be shook. Right, that's the inevitability, right? Like, look at history. Our son loves history. He loves it. I mean, we're constantly looking at these crazy, crazy aspects of history. You're going to get shook. Are you ready? Are you prepared? So I would urge us to recognize that our modern mythology, our modern myth, has at its core, at the surface, I think it has technology. Here's my technology bashing. By the way, I like technology, but when we're too over-reliant on something, it gets wonky. technology and money, because they do two things. They create convenience and comfort. And the world is not comfortable. Buddhism offers us a very solid mythology in its origin myth of Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha. He says he's locked in the castle by his father, who's terrified that he's going to leave because there was a prophecy that he would become a great man. And the father wanted him to be a king. So he kept him in the palace. He says, eat, drink, be merry, music, opulence, great food, all the sensory pleasures of the world. But he can't be contained, right? He goes with a charioteer out into the world. And over the course of a couple of different journeys, he sees old age. He sees sickness. He sees death. He sees poverty. He also sees a holy person. And he realizes his calling. And he leaves the house. It's a metaphor. It's many things, right? But it's a metaphor. To be contained in the illusion of safety, comfort, security, certainty, versus ambiguity, uncertainty, unknown, and adventure. We have to find a way to move out into the unknown and yet have our feet on the ground, recognizing that while we are alone, we are not alone. People have done this before. I forget the Anthony Hopkins movie where there's a big bear. Anybody know it, please holler it out. But he says at one point what one man can do, and I'll change that. What one person can do, another person can do. Radical, right? Radical. At some point I learned that kids stopped saying, I want to be a cop or an astronaut or a fireman or a scientist or they started saying, I want to be rich and famous. It happened about 20 years ago. And look it up. There's a lot of research on this. So we want the kind of freedom. It's an illusion, right? Because I work with a lot of people that have a lot of money, right? You know it, I know it. That does not do what we think it's going to do. But because we have not been trained in a way to look at the mythic realm that we're actually living out, we seek a secular surrogate: money, technology, comfort. I loved this depiction of Odysseus's exploration of the world. So this was the siren. This was a moment of the siren. If you ever saw Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Brilliant film. But it really clicks with our alcohol piece, right? This is the understanding we currently have of the sirens. They are seductive. They are sweet. They will bliss you out, right? There wasn't anything violent. What the sirens did in this depiction, which is modern, this is our modern take on a myth. What the sirens did is they distracted. They distracted the journeyers from their purpose, from their meaning. They were seduced by pleasure, by comfort, right? By having all their needs met, supposed needs met. But what's the cost? Well, it's their own soul. It's that unique part of yourself that rests in the collective, that makes up that one drop of ocean water that makes up the ocean. That's you, right? That your soul is what gets hijacked. You may feel pleasant, right? We've done this before. Hedonism doesn't exactly work on large scales. If you want to go be a hedonist, right, go into a community and live that way. But for the masses, it doesn't quite work. Dante Alighieri, at the beginning of the Divine Comedy, says, midway upon the journey of our life, I found myself within a forest dark. That's not a misquote. That's the way he says it. For the straightforward path has been lost. Ah me, how hard a thing it is to say, what was this forest savage, rough and stern, which in the very thought renews the fear, so bitter is it. Death is little more. But of the good to treat, which there I found, speak will I of the other things I saw there. I cannot well repeat how there I entered. So full was I of slumber at the moment in which I had abandoned the true way. Later, before he enters into the descent, he passes a threshold that says, ye who enter, abandon all hope. And I don't think it's hope in the way that we typically understand hope. I think it's hope in the way that we would typically understand our ego's illusion about safety and security, about being protected from any confrontation with the exact experience that would unlock us from the pool of our own adaptations that's necessary, right? I mean, I want to find out a way to be with people and say hello and greet you and work and create a home and all that. But then eventually I have to forge out on my own and figure out who I am, apart from all those adaptations. And myths can help us do that. These are bullet ants. You ever heard about this? Anybody? So bullet ants are in the Amazon rainforest, and their name is quite literal. Their sting is supposed to be stronger than, it's 30 times stronger than a bee sting. The reason they're called bullet ants is because it feels like being shot. To talk about myth, this is a child wearing this. So what they do is they put an herb all over these bullet ants and they kind of anesthetize them, and then they interweave them into this basket here. So their stinger is facing out. And you put these on as a child for 10 minutes, and you do it 20 times over your early life, around 12 to 15. I see your faces. We look at this and go, are you fucking crazy? Right? I know what you're thinking. Yeah, no. Sign me up. I wish. That's what's in my consciousness. I wish I had this. I wish I had people saying, this is what life is like. This is how you're initiated. This is how you go from the threshold of your childhood into the threshold of your early adulthood. There's a marker, there's a path, there's a way, and we're showing you. You are now a part of this community. And we have to bleed. Right? That's what a sacrifice is, giving up of something. That's why we create all these rituals and rites of passage. So we look at this like it's crazy. Great, I'm not gonna sign my daughter up to do this. I totally get that. But what it does is it's evidence of the lack that we have in our culture. Remember what our rites of passage are? Have sex for the first time and drink? Right? Not this. We don't have this. Trying to check the time because I'm about to get impassioned. So Lila Scott and I talk about this a lot. In antiquity, the midwives knew a hell of a lot more than the physicians did because they bounded together. They learned the body through childbirth, through menstruation. They learned botanicals. They learned rites of passage. They learned how to connect. Menstruation, a fundamental rite of passage for our culture, for our people, not men, right? Men often, the way it's often said is that men have to go become men. Women are born women, right? And then that's why you see all these guys doing all this crazy shit across the world, right? We're trying to initiate ourselves, I need something. I need to know where I'm oriented in this crazy world. Right? Of course, there are so many issues. Anytime I talk about men and women, I feel like, okay, got to be careful here. But what we've done is taken rites of passage that are natural, where women come together and connect and share knowledge and share wisdom and share insight. We benefit, all of us. I want your knowledge. By the way, for those of you who are not in this room, I am in a room full of women and one dude. And I'm talking about women here, but truly, as a dude in the culture, I want the women to be connected deeply with their femininity and with their ancient wisdom. And we don't offer that as a culture. We tell girls to stick a tampon in their vagina and go to school and act like everything's normal. Or we don't tell them anything at all. You know how many people I talk to and say, what were your early stories? What did you hear about sex? What did you hear about menstruation? What did you hear? You'll be blown away by the kind of stories that we hear because people are just terrified of talking about their bodies. One of my favorite was my mother walked in the room, set a book down, and left. Or my mother came in the room and locked the door behind her as if it can't be shared with the rest of the family. And that's benign stuff. I mean, there's a lot of other stuff there. So we need to be connected with our nature. I'll finish after this. Believe me, I can go on for 3 hours. But this is Eleusis. The Eleusinian mysteries for 2,000 years. 2,000 years in ancient Greece. There was a journey. It was a pilgrimage. It happened twice a year, in the fall and in the spring, where anybody could go. Slaves could go. Women could go. Men could go. Anybody could go. You just had to have enough money to pay for your stay. You would stay in Athens, and you would do this process for 10 days. You would journey 15 miles. You'd be ridiculed on your path. They would yell at you. They would throw stuff at you. right? Because initiation is not pleasant, because life is not always pleasant. And if you're going to die, here's the phrase, it's said, if you die before you die, you won't die when you die. This was the way of thinking. 2,000 years, one family, a dynasty, sat over this and held the religious space. It's not totally known what went on, but it was pretty radical. Persephone was really coming out hard. The underworld, wicked shit. Right? Because if you have a mythic descent to the underworld, then you are more ill-equipped, or you are more equipped to deal with the descents that we all experience throughout our daily lives. So really, I talked about flow earlier, and I just want to finish with this. Flow is a state in which people become absorbed in an enjoyable activity such that they become blind to their external environment and unconcerned about the self or the passage of time. To reach a flow state, people must engage in an intrinsically rewarding activity that is just challenging enough to match one's skill level, and that provides a clear goal and feedback. A large body of evidence links flow to greater well-being in a variety of domains, including work, sports, collective gathering, rituals, so on and so forth. I'm going to just bash this sentence for a second, and I'm going to say it is not just enjoyable. It is not just rewarding. It is intentionally moving into environments that are somewhat predictable and safe, but are challenging and take you to your limit. What do they say in yoga, right? Go to your edge. Right? If we ritualistically go to our edge in life, we can show up and suit up for things, and we're more equipped. Like maybe we should go to our edge when it comes to talking about our bodies. Maybe we should go to our edge maybe in supporting our girls as they're becoming women. Maybe we should go to our edge talking about how it's pleasant to have sex, and it's not just for reproduction. So on and so on and so on. I'm about to get the hook. Thanks, y'all. Really appreciate your time. I really appreciate you and your words and setting the table here. And thanks to the Jung Center for having us. Be sure, by the way, for all of you here and all of you afar, to come into the Jung Center and check out what we're doing. The curriculum is outstanding. The community is amazing, and we are working really hard to provide needs for this Houston and beyond community to go to the depths, to create a community of people that talk about meaningful, present, natural parts of our development and of our lives. Thanks, y'all. Appreciate it.
In the room, comments or questions of these two, for these two? People who are online can submit questions via chat, and we'll make sure they get voiced.
So the story of the Sirens, what does that look like today? What are the sirens in our world today?
Yeah, so I'd answer with a really annoying therapy thing, which is, I don't know, what are they? What are yours? You know? So that would involve a conversation, right? Like, I think, so therapy is really valuable because we get to press out parts of ourselves that we're not really conscious of. You know, we are limited by the instrument of consciousness, the unique instrument of consciousness that we each have. And so there's a value in coming together and being queried. So if you and I sit together and I say, well, tell me, like, what are your sirens? You know, what does that even mean to you? I would say on one level, they're the poles. So that which is distracting. I think to really reduce it, I would say it's anything that distracts us from our soul's call, from our given truth, you know. And in so many levels, our life is a commentary on being kind of distracted from that, because one of Jung's quotes that I love is that every child has to live out the unlived life of the parent. You know, so, but they have to do that, right? Because so as parents, we have to shape our children in ways that are both conscious and unconscious. But then as young adults and adults, we have to say, oh my God, that's not me. And they aren't who I imagine them to be. So now I've got to go off on my own way and figure out who the hell I am. So what are your distractions? What are your patterns, essentially? And that's why journaling can be really helpful. And being self-reflective certainly can be helpful. What do you have?
I just wanted to add to that. So he mentioned it, but I would look at diversions, you know, and I happen to know a thing or two about you. So remember the day you were like, I've got to go to the beach. I've got to go to the shore. That was life. So this definition, this last slide that John had of the definition of flow state, I mean, like, great. So, we've got to like reduce it and figure out the really pretty, really intellectual sounding sentences. But it is just like you talked about quickening at one point. Yeah. That also is your life force. And so when you wake up one day and you're just like, I've got to go to the beach, that is life telling you where you need to go. And you had good reason to push it back a day. But if you hadn't, if it had been, no, I just need to do one more thing. And I really need to attend to that spreadsheet. And so-and-so is expecting X, Y, and Z from me. Then that would have been a siren, answering to the sirens as opposed to your life force, telling you how to become more alive.
Sirens eat you, right? Hansel and Gretel, the witch eats you. In Rapunzel, or Tangled, great movie, right? The stepmother consumes the life force of Rapunzel. It's in service to me when I'm consuming somebody else. So sirens tend to be that which consumes our energy, that which distracts us, leaves us depleted. And so really draw it, dance it, sing it, talk about it, look at it, pay attention to it, yeah.
So I think we're at time. Mary, is there any question back there that we need to include in the conversation? So this is leaving me wanting. I just want to continue to have the conversation all afternoon. I want to say three things. One, Mary and Tebby, it is wonderful to see your face on the screen. You are filling the room at the Jung Center right now. It's so good to see you. Leela Scott waved at you a minute ago. It was Philip Cannon before you, who didn't pick his nose, and I was really proud of him. Secondly, if you're interested in flow, the movie Soul, have y'all seen the Pixar film Slow? They operationalize that in such a wonderful way. It's a bit positive and negative, and yep. Thirdly, God bless you both. Thank you so much for being here and for doing this. I hope that we've left you stirred up a bit and interested in learning more and coming back to the Jung Center. We're so grateful that you could be here with us today. I want to thank the two of you. We have a small gift that we want to pass along to you. The Art of C.G. Jung, which is a beautiful book, and also a copy of Delia Ephron's latest book that is actually available. Delia Ephron is our fall benefit lecture speaker, which is happening on October the 5th, which is just about 10 days away. If you can join us for that, please do. She is just a delightful human being, very funny and very real, and will not blow smoke up any of our tukuses. So she's great. Thank you all so much. For those of you who are online and could join us online, thank you so much, and we hope to see you back here soon.